which is going to have a separate, session exclusively for youths and teenagers. So here we have with us Geetika, who's got a lot of training for, she's got a lot of things to share with the youths and teenagers. Knowing Geetika a little, she's brought up in Jammu, but she's worked in the south, and she loves poetry. She writes poetry. She's a poet. She's a trainer. She's a multitask person. Her communication. She is a person who has learned how to communicate, and she knows the value of communication. It's not that she just communicates for the sake of communication. Getting it. Many of us do that because we don't know the value of communication, and she has chosen especially in the borders. She is in Jammu, and she's chosen a profession which is completely a different line. Most of us love to earn money, and we would love to stay in a government firms, especially in places like the border places where government jobs are more prominent. But Geetika has chosen to do something different for the society, in which she wanted to train the children in a way that they can communicate perfectly to the others in a simpler and in a very, very easy manner, which is understandable. Because basically for me, Geetika, I understand that communication is what others should understand. There are times when we communicate in such high language and we really don't know why, we don't know whether the other person listens or not. Whether they get the vocabulary or not. So this communication is not about vocabulary. It is a heart-to-heart communication wherein you wanted to talk to somebody, you transfer certain things to the other person. And she's a trainer, and she's been training this for so many years. And let's get to know who is Geetika and how is she, why did she choose this profession? Geetika, over to you. Tell me, in Jammu, why did you choose communication and training communication as your profession?
Yeah, so Priya ma'am, there's something called ikigai. So it's a Japanese concept which implies that the best thing for an individual to do is to make a career out of their passion. So it's something that makes them financially independent, but it's not just about being financially independent. It's also about you getting that creative satisfaction out of your work, and you also getting that feeling of satisfaction relating to you being able to do something for other people as well, right? So it's a combination of all these factors. When I was younger, I had a flair for languages, not only English, but our mother tongue, Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi. I write in several languages. So I always wanted to take up literature and be a writer. And gradually, when I grew up, I started understanding that, even when I would write, I remember social media was newly introduced and I would write poetry over there. And a lot of people would say that we don't understand difficult English, or even Hindi for that matter. People did not have a vocabulary, they did not understand figurative expressions, right? So from the very start, I had this, idea that people over here are sagacious enough, but still they are very weak with respect to communication skills. Gradually, after my stint in the corporate sector, I moved back to my hometown, Jammu, in the year 2017. And then I did not want to take up a job. I thought, why not create something of value for this society from where I've been gaining all of my experience in. So I thought that I'll create this little institute where I'll provide basic English training to people. And gradually we evolved to include all of the courses that I was passionate for. I evolved as a person, so I understood that communication is, like you very correctly said, it's not about you using high frequency words and not caring about whether the other person understands them or not, right? So I also understood this, having interacted with very small children. With There are people who are like retired people also joining my institute, 60 plus and all, and very very small kids, 4 years and all that also, right? So having dealt with a wide range of people like that, I realized that communication is making your point come across, but also in a beautiful spiritual sense, right? For that, we need to access poetry. For that, we need to access different, writing devices, speaking devices like voice modulation. There is a music about language also, right? Language can be a sensual experience. Language can be a spiritual experience, right? It can help us evolve. It can help us evolve It can help the other person listening to us evolve, right? So it's a great tool for evolution, a spiritual evolution, right? It enables us to cross spiritual milestones. So why not empower people with this kind of understanding of language? So our curriculum was very different. Initially, when we started, so I was just researching on how will we impart this kind of education, because it's a very soulful thing for me, considering I write poetry, but a person who does not have an ear for poetry, how is that person going to understand all of this? I did not want to be this trainer who, doles out lists of vocabulary words to students and they have to memorize the words and then they, start flashing them in very flashy sentences. I did not want that. I did not want to train them in an accent which is not Indian, right? So we came up with a curriculum which is, you can say, a mixture of us giving them input, but it is more output oriented. Like if we teach them vocabulary, so it's more experiential in nature. So, for example, if we take up a vocabulary lesson, it will be very short. It will not have a lot of words thrust in them all at once. So, it will be few words, like 7 to 8 words, which they'll be using over the course of the week. Nobody has to memorize anything at all. And then it's about figuratively understanding, right? For example, the word fire, right? So directly fire would mean the element fire, right? But if I address somebody like a kid, I say that this kid is fire, if he's on fire, right? It means that they are very energetic. So we try and make younger people understand the figurative meaning hidden in the word. So this is how we teach them not only vocabulary and grammar, but also how to write poetry, how to create stories of value, all of this, right? So yeah, this has been my journey, and we are 5 years into this institution now. So it's picking up, and we have students not only from Jammu and Kashmir, but from beyond Jammu and Kashmir, from South, from Punjab, even from abroad.
Wonderful, Geetika. Geetika, can you tell me what prompted you to write poems? I would love to hear that from you.
I wish I had a straight answer to this, but I just remember, if I look back at my past, I just remember myself as being a person who was very connected to nature, who was very observant and very silent. So the moment like nursery rhymes were taught to us, so I just would remember each and everything. I could memorize lyrics of songs very quickly, and I was five-ish. I started to create something. One experience that I would like to relate over here is my best friend, she was slightly overweight. Like, I would not like to say it like this, but considering the social things. So I remember she would be bullied at school. And I wrote a poem about that. It was a concern to me. I did not like how she was being treated, because for me, she was the most special person. So I remember I wrote a poem, and my father, he was so touched by that poem I wrote at 5 or 6. He would recite it to all of the people who would visit us. So it goes like this: if you are fat, don't feel sad. God has made you and He makes nothing bad. So I was very little. I was very affected by how society treats people, right? So I did not know what consciousness is at that juncture, but I think somewhere I was empowered enough to understand that consciousness is somewhere related to our ability to suffer, or it's also related to how much pain we feel and how we deal with it, right? So that kind of prompted me to create poetry as a tool, as a it just became my voice against all of this that was happening around. Plus I loved nature, and I had a deep inclination towards God. I was not very religious. We were not a religious household at all. My mom was little religious, but none of us were. But I had this, I had these questions from the very start. Where have we come from? I would gaze at stars. So I just wanted to express that through my poetry, and gradually it just became my outlet. I had an ingrown universe inside of my mind. I could not express more while talking, so I would just write it down and I could recite it very well. So I would find the music that is within my soul by reciting it, and this is how I plunged into poetry.
You were mentioning, right, Geetika, that the vocabulary and the training programs have made you evolve spiritually also and as a person also. So can you relate some experience wherein you grew and you understood the value of the training programs that you are conducting it?
So, ma'am, if I try to articulate my experiences, I would say that it has been a beautiful learning experience for me. When we start something, being a young person, I had had this experience of language by reading, by creating stuff on my own, but it was less to do with interaction. Although I had worked down south and in other parts of India, and I had been abroad also on some conferences and some programs, so I had met a lot of people, but I would not say that my interactions had been very meaty or material, right? So once when I started teaching this, then I confronted several issues. Like I understood that I operate from a different place, and people may have different perspectives from which they are operating, right? So we have to come at the same level to understand each other. So initially, I remember when I introduced my first poetry course. So I would not understand why people have apprehensions pertaining to that. They said, like, I had a lot of concerns that parents raised. So some people said, I don't want my kid to be a poet. I want my kid to be a rocket scientist. I want my kid to be a doctor. So what do we have to do with poetry, right? So I want my kid to be logical and not philosophical, right? So I understood that there is a lot of stigma attached to people being philosophical, people thinking about life, right? Most people, they just their thinking is very comfort oriented, and that is what they preach their kids. They preach their kids this simple formula of life wherein you study and you acquire a position, you wear a label on your sleeve, and you make your life very comfortable, and then you don't have to worry again, right? So this is something that draws them away from poetry and thinking. So they think that thinking is a disease, like one of the examples. So it was a huge battle. Initially, I would try to convince people using language. So when I was in these dilemmas, when I actually confronted these issues, then I understood how I can use language to make somebody understand why this is critical. And then when people were learning it, they were starting to appreciate poetry. A lot of notions, preconceived notions that I had had, a lot of myths were busted. Like, for example, I used to believe that a very small kid cannot write poetry, right? I used to feel that a kid who's 4 years of age cannot create a poem, right? It just cannot be, right? They can memorize a poem maybe. Like if you work hard, if you make them memorize it, they might be able to do so. But for them to create something is not possible. But I'll tell you something. When I started working with very small children, I understood there was poetry ingrained in them. They had a very huge view of the world. Their canvas was larger than an adult's canvas. And they had, while we have only those three primary colors at our disposal, they have a variety of shades that they can use to express themselves, right? And they, jump between emotions like anything. At supersonic speed, can they jump between emotions? So once when I started teaching them metaphor, it was so easy. I remember when I would communicate about metaphor with older kids, I would tell them the cloud is crying. And like, how a cloud can cry? It's just rain, right? It's not a cloud crying. Whereas if you would say this to a younger kid, he would not question you. He would just simply say, yeah, clouds cry, right? When it rains, they're sad. They are very loaded with their emotions, so they cry, right? So it's very easy for them to understand things which are supernatural or which are not very logical. So these are a few things that I learned. And one conclusion that I drew was that in order to train other people, the spirituality about them has to come alive. And for that to happen, we have to reintroduce them to the child within them. So if as a trainer you're able to do that, then it is wonderful. So now how would you do that, right? Nobody wants to act like a child. So being a child is also about joy, right? So once when you make people feel very free, they can go wherever they like, right? It's not a course which is bound by rules, right? You can say or express anything, you can go wherever you like, you can write a poem about anything that you want, right? There are no restrictions around language, there's no yes or no, right or wrong. And then there's this feeling of joy wherein when they create something which is illogical or which is surreal, it just gives them a very beautiful, empowering feeling. That's when the kid inside them feels alive. And then they can, very comfortably walk into this forest of metaphors and analogies and writing devices and speech. So, yeah, these were my learnings.
Wonderful. The children basically they teach us a lot. The more the smaller they are much more connected to nature and they're much more connected inward. Na Geetika, they're like completely within and they love to express it in their own way. And that's the beauty. But how do you think that, in the journey of life, you see you're teaching even the older children, right? So what is the shift that you're noticing in their writing, in their expressing vocabulary from the child when they change into a youth?
Uh, I don't want to sound negative, but say that there's a kid who's not been with us from the nascent stages of learning, right? There are kids who join at 4 or 5, so then they don't grow out to be very limited people. But say a kid joins our center at 14 or 13 or maybe 10, these kids, I think their approach to learning is very different. When kids evolve, it's a kind of devolution only, because what I notice is, in the garb of being practical, they become very limited, right? They're very logic centered, which means that they will expect an answer which is black and white, right? So this is a very limited view of the world, right? So this is one. Then there is some sort of polarization in our society that has happened, right? So if you speak to a kid, who's not had access to language and poetics and music and arts in general, and a wide variety of these things, so they will be polarized in the sense, right? They believe that there can be only one reality. There can be only one version of the truth. There can be only single story about it. There's right and then there is wrong, right? So this is the approach. Coming back to your question on how you see this happen in vocabulary. Very right. People think, for example, that like we were discussing, that vocabulary is something by which people be very flashy. It's a thing to display. Whereas vocabulary is a tool with which you can express yourselves better. Why should we have a deeper vocabulary? Not because we want to show the other person I have 10 different words for happy, but because all of these 10 different words are a shade different from each other, right? So if you have three colors at your disposal, you won't be able to create a grand effect with your painting, right? Whereas if you have a gazillion colors, like nature, right? Nature has a bounty of colors. So a tree is not, for example, only one version of green. It is several million colors of green are possible over there, right? So likewise with vocabulary, if you have a deeper understanding of language, if you have a lot of words at your disposal, you can express yourselves better. But the challenge is that the other person should also understand. This is why we are elevating language for everybody around us now. So this is there. Also, I think in today's time, our kids are facing a key challenge with respect to addiction to gadgets. So this is very real for me. I think most kids, teenagers are it's very sad, but they are really toxically addicted to gadgets, and this trickles down to so many aspects of their life. They communicate very less. They don't understand spellings much. It just is noticeable in their tonality also, right? So they are very aggressive when they communicate, right? So because they just want to snap out of a conversation so that they can pick their gadget immediately, right? There is an attention issue. So if you're talking to somebody, I think this kind of a talk with a young kid addicted to gadgets is not possible, only because they don't listen, or they are not willing to put in as much to explain themselves, right? They just want to answer in a very small, what do you say? They just want to snap an answer in just very brusquely with a word or two, right? So this is there. So this is why they are not very explorative with respect to language. They are so addicted that their body would, shake. They're moving their fingers or moving their legs perpetually. So this takes them, this makes them mindless when they are accessing language, when they're reading, listening, communicating with someone. They're not 100% involved into that experience. This is why they don't get those sensations that a person who's a poet gets or a painter gets, right? Because they are very, very cautious of the time that is going into the conversations. Whereas when I'm writing a poem or a painter is making a painting, time is just forgotten, right? We don't understand, or we don't feel the passage of time. So these are a few concerns. I think to bring them back to this mindfulness, it's very important to make them withdraw from these gadgets, and to have these substantial conversations with them, wherein we discuss what issues affect them and what are the problems that they would like to resolve. So if the communication hovers around that, I think they can be brought back to the path where they start understanding themselves better.
So now, this poet, children now have lost, they don't, I mean, the level of writing that we did, nowadays children don't write. Because of that, the entire body, there's a lot of things that's happening when we write and when we don't write. And it's the same with the reading books and writing poem and all these things, drawing, painting, everything. Now, what would be your suggestion to the parents? Because this has to be given to the parents to make them realize that the gadgets are not their world. Because in one way, I would say gadgets are good, but all the informations getting from the gadgets, I would definitely disagree. Because when you start exploring the world, na Geetika, it makes a lot of difference. Because the confidence that we get when we sit down to write a poem or when we sit down to paint is different from what you see and write or draw or whatever from the Google. So what message do you want to give the children and also the parents that how can we, I would put it in this way, that what is a solution for this? How do we tell the parents rightly that I understand that the parents don't have time, but in spite of that, how do we make them understand the value of books, the value of writing, which is missing in this present generation, and which is leading to lack of self confidence and fear? Because I'm also an art of living teacher who teaches children, and what I understand is there's a lot of inner fear in children and a lack of confidence that they are having. So, what is the solution, Geetika? What can we do? Of course, our spiritual practice is definitely there, but complementing it, what can we do for them?
So this is a great question. I have a few thoughts in this regard. I would like to say that primarily, I think parents have to be involved in the learning process. So our kids imitate us, right? So they don't imitate or they don't listen to our orders or what we say, but they imitate our actions, right? They are an extension of us. So if there's a parent who's reading a book versus there's a parent who's always on phone, right? So you will notice that effect in their children also, right? If a parent is inclined to exploring something on the phone 24/7, right? They come back from office and they show the child that their way of relaxing is accessing their phone, then the child would also want to find out what is so attractive on the phone, right? Whereas if there's a parent who's coming back from office, doing the chores, and then maybe they pick up a book at night, and the child is observing the parent, the mother, the father, and they're noticing how the facial expressions are changing while the parent is reading a book. So when a person is deeply involved in the reading process, so they'll smile, they'll laugh, they'll be like, so it's like beautiful to observe a person who's reading, right? So one, or maybe they've picked the guitar and they're playing and the expressions are unfolding and music is getting created, right? The vibrations of the space are getting changed. So when a kid is observing that, they want to find out what is there in the book that is causing these expressions. I also want to access that flavor, right? So this is one that in order to teach something to your kids, you have to be first mindful yourself. Then only will your kids be mindful, right? So if you scream, if you yell, if you are very uncomfortable with yourself, so your kids are not going to be then very relaxed. This is one. Then we have to understand there is difference between access and skill, which means you may have a car, but to drive is another thing, right? So you may have a lot of things at your disposal, for example, but to actually navigate through this world is an art, right? So uh, if you have a gadget that can lead you to n number of portals and you have access to a lot of information, but the thing is, do you have the skill of filtering what is right for you? Do you have the skill of drawing inferences from the different sources you've gathered that information? Can you draw those inferences and create something original? What is your voice, right? I look at you, I draw similarly. That's not my voice, right? What is my own thing that I put into that, right? So parents have to understand that just because your kid is at par with other kids, they have the same gadget, they have access to a lot of information, and they're babbling without making sense. They're just babbling away. They're talking about things that are not their age, for example, right? So it's no reason to be proud. You have to understand that it's not an indicator of their intelligence. It's just that so much is being fed into their head. So this is why they're doing it. When we did not have internet, we used to refer to books, right? So we could not have access to as much information. But since the information was condensed, it was very easy for us to process it. It was a bite-sized information. We would ingest that information, process it in our mind, and its meaning would evolve over time. What I think at 10 is different from what I think at 15 and then 20. This is why if I listen to a song at the age of 5, and then I actually, I don't understand it much, but somehow the tune is there in my mind, right? And at 15 or 25, newer meanings of the same song get conveyed to me, right? Now, talking about writing, I think writing is very, very essential. Penmanship is an art. So, since we want to learn something better, it's science that says that all of our senses have to be employed in it, right? If we merely see something, our grasp is not going to be tighter, right? So seeing, listening, writing, speaking, all of these put together will make us evolve and evolve writer. And writing adds a personal touch. So again, I think something that parents can do is instead of texting their kids, I know that there's a busy life and technology has a part, but they can, plant a little sapling of, art in the lives of their children if they so want, right? Handwritten notes. When you make a present to your birth for on your child's birthday, you make a present to them, write them a letter. Well, I do that. I am infamous or famous, I don't know, for doing this. If I make a present to my mom, whatever language she understands, she's good at Hindi, so I write a note in Hindi for her, a letter. If it's my bhabi, she's good in English, so I'll write a letter in English. Whether they write it back to me or not is immaterial. I try and showcase that I'm very personally involved in making this present. So these little gestures can enhance the value of literature in an individual's life.
I know you have done the Art of Living program, and then you have been practicing the pranayam and kriya for so long. So one spiritual question to you: How, as so you've been practicing the kriya and meditation for quite a long time now, meditation. In fact, you've been meditating. How is it making you evolve as a person, and how is it? How is it? How are you able to transfer it to the children in your training modules and in the way you communicate? Are you finding a difference before and after?
I think talking about the physical changes, when I engage into these deep breathing exercises, I feel so relaxed and I've been able to bring down my anxieties. And I think one more thing that has happened at a mind level is that I no longer worry about the future. I don't know how this is happening, but I think at the DNA level only some change is happening. I have always been a person who's ambitious and I tend to worry about my future. I tend to, reimagine my past, and this is my favorite pastime, and this is something that I put into my writings. So, of late, I've been feeling more courageous and calmer. And I think because I am calmer, so that is definitely translating into my teaching. So I'm calmer with the kids. And because the kind of exercises we take up at times are to do with poetry, not always, but sometimes we indulge into, one part of a month we are doing something related to poetry. So that involves us to observe, right? And it requires patience from both the ends because for the mentor, you are able to come up with a lot of metaphors, whereas the kid is not able to instantly come up with metaphors, right? So things like that. You're teaching something very very difficult to a child, right? Recently, we've been doing a workshop on paintings, right? How to find meaning in a painting. So these paintings are surreal, right? So they don't know instantly what is the meaning of that painting. Now the thing is, kids also have this attention thing, right? And as a mentor, I also want them to answer very quickly, right? But that doesn't happen always. So with these breathing exercises, delving deeper into meditation and the spiritual world, I've realized that everybody has their own start point, and I'm much, much calmer when I'm dealing with them. They look at a painting and I let them look at it for as long as they wish, and I'm not always like expecting an output out of it, right? Plus, I feel more courageous in taking up things that I was not confident about earlier, right? So, and how am I, training differently? One more thing is there. I always communicate to my students that they have to start breathing exercises and meditation very early. So I make it a point, although we are talking about language mostly, but I make it a point to tell them that if they want to access every corner of their being, this is metaphorical again, because once you're doing kriya, you feel that your breath is reaching every corner of your being. So like that, if you want to access your highest potential, you have to be a meditator. The sooner you do, the better it is. It is again a thing of practice, how calm you get, how resilient you are as a person, how courageous you can be. If you're courageous from the start, you take those leaps of faith and you access, your the best opportunities for you. Whereas if you're an insecure person, so you will just let go, and you will not make the most of your life, right? So I always make it a point to tell my students that they have to get into breathing and meditation. And happy to tell you, so many of them are actually, they listen to me. So many of them are actually, willing to get into that. Yeah.
Geetika, can you give us a gist of your training modules, and how the children can study it online, or how do we access from different parts of the world?
So mine is a startup, ma'am. It's called Thinksta. 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 It's the Government of India recognized startup, and we were recognized for our efforts by ASSOCHAM also. So it's doing well. And like I said, we have vibrant students from various regions in India and abroad. So now we have different programs for different age groups and different levels, and different objectives are there, right? So for example, a very, very basic program can be accessed online by anybody anywhere across India and abroad. So basically, all you need to do is make a little enrollment, a registration, right? You have to share your details and all of that. And what comprises of the curriculum is, we try at a lower level, we try and hit on your vocabulary, your grammar, your diction, pronunciation. But at a higher level, we will teach you figurative language right from the start, right? What are these devices? So it won't be complicated. If you're a person who is weak at communication, or you're very young, right? You're just 4 or 5, you don't have an experience with communication at all. So we just, make bite-sized version of these higher things for you, and you just have to practice it. Our curriculum, our classes run from Monday until Friday, and it's a 40-minute to 1 hour class only. We seldom give any homework, so it's a no stress thing. So what do we do is, every single day we have something different going on, right? So if we've done vocabulary on Monday, for example, on Tuesday it will be something wherein you will be applying that vocabulary. So it will be fun. You are engaging into a role play, for example, right? So you can use those filters and become a character and use those words that you've learned. Or maybe you're doing a group discussion, or there's storytelling, right? Then there's writing. We give a lot of importance to writing skills. So even if you're doing the course online, we will make you write, right? Because if you're just verbally learning language, you might not know the right usage of punctuation, spellings, right? All of that. So then we have modules for grammar. Now these are not modules wherein we just teach you rules, right? Okay, if you have to do tenses, so this is past perfect tense. It's not like that. It's very application oriented, and it's very individual oriented, which means, like, if I'm engaging with one person, it's a individual centered course. So I'll find out the lacunae in their communication skills, right? So, oh, they don't understand how to use articles properly, right? So we'll hit at that point only. And secondly, for example, if we are teaching punctuation to a kid, but punctuation is also about you speaking, right? So punctuation will not mean I'll showcase all these symbols to you and you just have to tell me the meaning of those symbols and just write down, and you'll get full marks for punctuating a paragraph correctly. It's also about how you speak. So you'll be saying something like, today I will introduce Miss Geetika to you. She is a trainer, right? So where to pause, how to highlight things, what is the role of inverted commas through speech, right? That is there. Then writing devices are there, right? From a very young age, kids have to understand what is idiomatic expression, what is figurative expression, how to create metaphors, right? So instead of you delivering a topic like, hello, I'm Sadhvi, my mom is Pranaya Sharma, not like that, right? So we'll start with, uh, a mother is like a flower who spreads fragrance, who spreads the fragrance of her love everywhere. So this a 4 to 6 year old kids can also do, and our kids are doing this. So they'll be making 3 comparisons, and then a mother is like a flower spreading a fragrance everywhere. A mother is like a candle lighting the space. A mother is like a medal that God has given us, right? That God has granted us. Hello everyone, I'm Sadhvi Gupta, and today I'm going to tell you about my mother, right? So instead of a very basic and average description where it's not even personal what you feel about your mother, we try and help you find that connection with your family also, and then translate it into language at a very young age. So this is a basic program. Other than that, we have programs to do with poetry, storytelling, writing, advanced programs. So we have a website as well, and I'll be sharing the link with you. So you can learn more about what kind of programs we have from there, and then you can reach us on our phone or wherever you like, right?
How different is Jammu, I mean, or the children in Jammu from the children of the other section? I would say, I mean, especially what I have noticed is in the borders, because borders children, I find they are a little different. Of course, they are very active, but the level of the other things, the linguistic part is a little different, not just in Jammu. In fact, I would say Northeast and, in the Andamans. These are places in the border areas. So, as a trainer, how did you find? I mean, what difference are you finding in this? The children of different sections, especially, I would address this for the borders. Is it because of the what do you say? It is because of the border. We share a border, a common border with the other country, and we always have a disturbance. Is it because of that, or is there any other reason beyond that that the children lag a little bit?
Yeah, so I often think about this. So, ma'am, I believe language is a mirror into your personality, right? And now your personality is affected by a gazillion factors, right? One factor is like, the geographical placement of an individual. So, considering the culture you are born in, right? How you're going to communicate is going to, depend on where you are born, right? For example, talking about border areas, I think most people are always in fight or flight mode, right? There's a lot of stress, right? So one thing that I've noticed is because I train in villages, I go to really remote places to teach sometimes, and we have to be taught basic English, and the kind of budget we have or the kind of limitation we have is that is to be done say in 3 days only, right? And these kids are very incommunicative. They don't speak much, right? So this is one difference. When I remember when I had this stint in Chennai, I just was so happy to be there because down south art has a value, right? Everybody engages in some art form, so they respect if you're a writer. Everybody, they you don't have to explain it to them what is the importance of music and dance, right? What can a painting do to a person? Whereas up north art is not very central to our existence. Maybe because we hail from a place where people are always, there's so many things that they are battling, right? So it's a luxury to access art over here. So where it's a question of survival, people want to learn skills which will immediately fetch them a job, right? So advanced communication and painting. So these are not things that can fetch you, a career over here. So this is one reason. Then I think down south, people have retained their cultural values. So I think kids are very, I'll not say obedient, but I'll say that, they are humble and they're down to earth. They still respect their elders. So if you want to, feel that those vibrations of Indian culture, you go down south and you will notice, people will open doors for you. They will bow down. They will give the best of the things to you, and so they are very giving and magnanimous. Whereas in North, we are getting more westernized also, and there is, I think, because of that, there is more. I don't know why we've given up on our cultural values somewhere as parents, as teachers. So because of that, our kids are also there is some sort of materialism that I've noticed, and that is getting reflected in their language. So, for example, you will not find it sounds like a generalization, but if I have to, dare to make that generalization, I would still say that down south you will notice that language is about respect, whereas in north it is about taking away respect, right? So it's like a weapon through which you can insult someone and take away respect, and this is very visible, very visible. I've flown to so many parts of the country, and I've seen that you go to Delhi, even our place. So you will see that kids are losing their culture, our vernaculars. For example, it's people feel very humiliated to talk in their mother tongues, right? So English, everybody wants to speak in English, which is great. It's a global language. You have to hone your communication skills if you want to reach a level, right? But it's not about giving up on your language, right? So it's not that they don't speak English well. They don't even speak Hindi well. They don't speak their Punjabi well. They cannot speak Urdu well, Dogri well, right? So all of these languages are somewhere getting lost, right? Whereas if you go to down south, language is pride, right? So you would rather speak in your language than in a foreign language, right? I remember I used to work in the corporate, and I didn't know a thing about Tamil. And the first day I was intimidated because it's nowhere related to Hindi. I strongly believe these are two different languages. They don't have the same origin. They may have gotten transfused a bit, but they are different, right? They are not the same. So I remember that it was very intimidating for me to understand. On the first day, I just wanted to flee back to the north because I thought, how will I communicate? But I came back and I accessed Google and I learned how to say hi in Tamil along with the accent and everything. And that was how I was able to befriend people around me because they would speak in Tamil, right? It was not that they don't know English. These are very, very literate and intelligent people, but they cherish their language. They would, it was very easy for me to find people who could recite something in, Tamil poetry at ease. They are in the corporate sector, so they know about Tirukural and they'll just throw it like that in their conversation. Whereas if you go to the north, so, there'll be one particular person who would know about poetry, but not everyone. So it's less seen, right? So these are the things that you notice. These are the subtle differences between kids in the north and south and otherwise. So I believe South is faring better because they are more respectful, they honor their culture, they are more metaphorical and more expressive in their. There are so many colors that get reflected in their conversations versus North, which is clipped and westernized talk and less respectful sometimes.
Any message you want to give through the channel to the children? The next generation will definitely be a beautiful set of. Actually, things are changing now, Geetika. Children have started realizing a lot of things. They've started valuing, yes, the role of gadgets is still a question mark. We'll have to, because I've seen children who are mostly in gadgets, they are not able to, as you rightly said, comprehend a lot of things. We're not able, even the listening, concentration, everything. So gadgets are not wrong because technologically we are advancing, so it has to be there. But the right usage of gadgets is very important. You cannot be in the gadgets for everything. And I truly believe that you don't have to know everything that is there in the world. What is essential, you just need to, because see, a 3-year-old child's innocence is such beauty to see than a 3-year-old child speaking something which a 7-year-old child has to speak, which I wouldn't like. For me, I don't acknowledge it, stating that my child knows everything, because I want the child to be innocent, frankly speaking. Because when a 3-year-old child speaks, a lot of love and there's a lot of expression that a child addresses it. But when that child knows too much things, and when the same, because I've been handling these children and I suddenly see a huge shift, and they know too many things at a very young age, which is not necessary. As you said, I mean, each bite is important, and that's all is needed. And you just go ahead, and I feel that is much more better than having the entire world's knowledge into your head and completely. Then we are getting bogged down, and finally what we're losing is we lose our self-confidence and courage. So as a personality, I mean, we are not portraying what we are. We become artificial. So truly said, Geetika, I would say that children from a very young age should have their identity, individual identity, which God has given. God has given us uniqueness and unique identity. So this identity, if we can cherish, I think that gives us the courage to stand up, and that is the self-confidence, like as you did. You were in the corporate sector and suddenly you decided to take up training, and you decided to go in for writing a poem, which is definitely a unique thing for anybody in Jammu. So that happens because you were in yourself and you didn't want to. So the artificial world fades. The world and the what we are born inbuilt, that cherishes, and I think that's what every child should come up with. And when we are honest with our own identity, then the rest of the values comes by itself. This is what I love to sum it up. And Geetika, you can sum it up a little better than me. Yes, Geetika.
I think you've given a beautiful message yourself. So I'll just reinforce your message and I'll say that it's important, like Priya ma'am has said, it's important to retain your originality, right? And not be a fake, right? We don't want to be clones of each other. So if you want to find yourself, see, like ma'am has very correctly put, and she said that, It's not worth it to know everything. It's not possible only to know everything, right? We cannot know everything, right? We are a product of the universe, so we are not larger than that. How can we look at something which is containing us, right? We just can never. An ant can never size up a human because it's tinier than a human, right? So we cannot. So we have to be humble about that. But at the same time, our power lies in finding out our individuality. And sometimes it takes an entire lifetime to find out who we are, right? So we should rather work on that. And for that, the first step is to retain your innocence and learn things naturally as they come to you, right? It has to be understanding related and not, chewing related. You have something and you chew it and then you try to digest something that you're not designed to digest. So it should not be like that. So take life as a beautiful journey of learning, and one day you will definitely stumble upon yourself. So if you live like that, you're going to stumble upon yourself. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Geetika. And this is the first edition of both of us coming together. This is just a beginning. So we'll start bringing in new innovative things so that this will be a beneficial for the society in a larger section. And the topic that both of us are going to work out is going to be unique, and it will have its own individuality because both of us believe in true identities. So we'll get back next month with something very interesting and very innovative. It can be an offline or an online or a live session. We never know. So let's give it. And thank you so much, Geetika, for coming on the show. Thank you very much.